Good evening, everybody. My name is Ben Helfond. I am the co-author of Our Happy Divorce. My co-author, Nikki DeBartolo, my ex-wife, is again not with us this evening, but she's in here with spirit, in spirit, I should say. And you know, these past 6 weeks or so, we've tackled some pretty big landmines in divorce and some pretty big issues. And last week we talked about drugs and alcohol in divorce. We've talked about kids, introduction of new partners, and it just seems to get a little bit more deeper every week. And this week, I think, takes the cake because we're talking about finding common ground, and not only in divorce, but what's happening with our society right now and social injustices that are happening. And again, I want to introduce the people who show up every week with me to do this and wouldn't be possible without them. And I'm just so grateful for them, for their time and their willingness to talk about this. And we have Kate Anthony, who is a divorce coach and has the best tagline ever, and helps women decide if they should stay or should they go. Should I stay or should I go? And she's also the host of the Survival Guide podcast, and also Susan Guthrie, who has 30 years of experience in mediation, and one of the best out there, and both of them are the best out there, and great people. And she's also the host of award-winning Divorce and Beyond podcast. So welcome to my partners in crime once again.
Hey, everybody.
You know, at least I sort of struggled with doing a live stream this week. And with everything going on, you know, did I want to take up the bandwidth talking about divorce or anything other than the topic at hand? And it wasn't until Tuesday that I listened to Kate Anthony's survival podcast, divorce survival podcast, where she did one of the bravest things I've seen in broadcasting and live streaming, and just was vulnerable by herself for 30 plus minutes, I think, talking about this issue. And you know, I want to say that she was the reasoning and sort of the tipping point of why I was okay doing this. And of course, we want to talk about divorce, right? And that is we're not three talking heads talking about politics or, you know, what's going on in the world, but there are some similarities, you know, and you know, finding a common ground, I think, is the solution, at least for Nikki and I. The common ground was our son, you know, and it was something that we could both sort of rally around. It was what we both rallied around, and it was the reasoning, you know, that we got to where we are today. In our divorce and why we're sitting here. And so, you know, Kate, during your podcast, you know, you talked about some pretty heavy issues, you know, and some, and did it in a way that was authentic and real. It's tough. You know, it's tough again for us, you know, not being, you know, politicians or not being talking heads. You know, we're just people who are in the divorce space. But to have the courage to talk about these issues, and being three, you know, one white man and two white women to talk about these issues is uncomfortable. You know, there's a fear on my end, at least, of saying the wrong things. But you gave me the courage, you know, and so a little bit about your podcast and why you decided to do it.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, I mean, really, you know, I am a very political person. I don't keep quiet, and I am very, very vocal, especially on race relations in this country, and I always have been. More on the personal side, right? That's my sort of like, if you're friends with me on Facebook, you'll see that side of me more often than you will necessarily in my work. But my work, I'm always talking about when we are looking at the systems that we have to kind of pull apart when women are trying to decide whether to stay or go. You know, in my program, it's sort of broken into three pieces. And the first piece is the self-work, right? Just all the self-work that has to go on into figuring out who we are so we can decide whether this marriage fits or doesn't fit. And the second piece is all cultural. And I break it down in my program about, you know, how the patriarchy has sort of defined and created, in particular, cis hetero relationships in the 21st century. And I don't think it's a piece that we can overlook. And when we're looking at the patriarchy, the bottom line is that the patriarchy has all of its roots in white supremacy. So I can't separate these. This is not separate for me in my work. And, you know, women's empowerment, in general, all women's empowerment, in my opinion, depends upon dismantling the patriarchy. Dismantling the patriarchy depends upon dismantling white supremacy. So it's all, to me, it's all kind of like, it's all the same. It's all part of the same bundle. So I can't talk about one without talking about the other. And then when something like this occurs, when something that is probably one of the greatest, certainly the greatest revolution of our lifetime is happening before our eyes, I can't not talk about it. And as a white woman, you know, what I said in my podcast was, you know, in the introduction, because I was terrified, you guys, I was terrified to put this out. And I was sort of like asking permission, and I was going into my group, and I was like, I don't know if I should do this. What do you guys think? And then finally I was like, hi, this is the definition of white fragility. It is the definition of white fragility that I am so concerned about getting it wrong that I'm considering not speaking out. And that has to stop, right? White people have to be willing to step in it. We have to be willing to get it wrong, and we have to be willing to make mistakes and say the wrong thing, because everyone's scared of saying the wrong thing. And we have to be willing to say the wrong thing. And we have to be willing to listen when either, you know, Black people or people of color or other, you know, more, quote, woke white people say, hey, I think you got that wrong. Then we have to be willing to say, oh shit, okay, sorry, and pivot and not get defensive and not double down on, but I'm an ally, or I'm a good white person, or I'm no, I stepped in it. Okay, because we are all, you know, in this system. The system affects every single one of us. Right. So yeah. So yeah, that's what.
You know, the one thing that I see, and Kate, I mean, Susan rather, the us versus them culture, right? And you're either with us or you're against us is what we see in general before this. You know, I think that's the way our society has sort of gone. And you know, Susan, I'm sure you see that every day in divorce, right? It's, you know, a battle, you know, and as a mediator, do you work at trying to find that common ground, or so you get away from that, you know, us versus them culture and everybody's sort of on the same team?
Yeah, that's exactly the focus, as opposed to being on separate teams, trying to get as much of what you can from the other person in an adversarial matter. In a mediation, we're trying to find the solution that works best for everyone, which is that common ground. It's 100%. You know, and that's the mindset we start with in a mediation process. So as opposed to, you know, and I will say most people come to mediation with that mindset, but not everyone. Some people have to help them. Definitely.
So just we stick on before we introduce our guests. So are there any things that you do to try to get people to find out that they have maybe more similarities or more things that they want out of their divorce when they don't come with that mindset?
Yeah, well, I mean, in every mediation that I do, one of the very first things that I do is an intention setting as we start, and we talk about what is it that you're hoping to achieve on a high level out of this process, this separating out of your lives in a certain way or reforming your family. And that's actually a very powerful moment, because I will tell you, almost universally, they find they have some similarities right there. They want what's fair. They want what's best for their children. They want their children to be happy, healthy, and whole. And starting on that note is a very powerful way to start. And it also gives us then something to go back to when they start to veer into their separate paths again. Well, remember, how is that helping you achieve that goal you had of doing what's best for your children? Is that helping attain that? Because you both wanted that.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is part of the process that goes through mediation or even, you know, before mediation when Kate gets involved. But for Nikki and I, you know, for the first step before we could do anything was we had to acknowledge that there was something wrong, right? We had to acknowledge that, you know, there was no villain, there was no bad guy, that both of us was wrong, right? That both of us had did something to end the marriage. And I think that, you know, as we broaden the lens a little bit tonight, that it has to start with at least an acknowledgement that what is happening isn't working, and that there has to be, you know, that before you can even move forward. And so, you know, part of the struggle with me and doing this, as I talked about, was, you know, no matter what sort of stripes I have, or, you know, I was an African American history major, you know, I worked closely with NAACP, but yet I feel like I have to say that, right? I feel like I have to, you know, explain, you know, what an ally I am, but instead of explaining really not what an ally I am to or what I've studied, but acknowledge that I have white privilege. You know, and just by the color of my skin, that I have an advantage in the society. And I saw something, and if you guys would just entertain me for a couple of minutes, on YouTube from like 2015 or something, that explains it. So if you, and I forgot that I was going to play this, and I didn't tell our guest, but we will get to her. But I really think this is important for people to watch and to see. So. Here.
Shoulder to shoulder, take off your backpacks. Basketball, line up, we're about to race. Hey, we are racing for a $100 bill. The winner of this race will take this. It's a $100 bill. Before I say go, I'm gonna make a couple statements. If those statements apply to you, I want you to take 2 steps forward. If those statements don't apply to you, I want you to stay right where you're at. Take 2 steps forward if both of your parents are still married. Take 2 steps forward if you grew up with a father figure in the home. Take 2 steps forward if you had access to a private education. Take 2 steps forward if you had access to a free tutor growing up. Take 2 steps forward if you've never had to worry about your cell phone being shut off. Take 2 steps forward if you've never had to help mom or dad with the bills. Take 2 steps forward if it wasn't because of your athletic ability, you don't have to pay for college. Take 2 steps forward if you never wondered where your next meal was going to come from. I want you guys up here in the front just to turn around and look. Every statement I've made has nothing to do with anything any of you have done. Has nothing to do with decisions you've made. Everything I have said has nothing to do with what you've done. We all know these people up here have a better opportunity to win this $100. Does that mean these people back here can't race? No. We would be foolish to not realize we've been given more opportunity. We don't want to recognize that we've been given a head start. But the reality is we have. Now, there's no excuse. They still got to run their race. You still got to run your race. But whoever wins this $100, I think it'd be extremely foolish of you not to utilize that and learn more about somebody else's story. Because the reality is, if this was a fair race and everybody was back on that line, I guarantee you some of these black dudes would smoke all of you. And it's only because you have this big of a head start that you're possibly going to win this race called life. That is a picture of life, ladies and gentlemen. Nothing you've done has put you in the lead that you're in right now. When I say go, on your mark, get set, go! If you didn't learn anything from this activity, you're a fool.
Yeah, so that just something that if you have kids, or I played it for my little ones, it explains it pretty well. And we're lucky that our guest tonight agreed to join us. She has ties to the divorce, which we'll get into. But Susan, if you could please introduce our guest.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to. I'm very excited to have her with us tonight. She's a new friend. I actually met Dana. Her name is Dana Davenport, and I actually met her very recently through divorce, through our mutual connections, honestly, through Instagram. And then I saw on TV or on our Instagram feed that she was starting a new show, which I'll tell you about in a moment. But let me tell you about her. Dana Davenport, she is the host of radio and television talk shows. Her show that I originally found her for was Dana Being Dana, which is here in Chicago and airs locally. She's also the co-founder and director of the Homecoming Challenge, a nonprofit alumni giving campaign, and is a full-time practicing attorney. She's one of my colleagues. And she's also the mother of two, and she divorced back in 2015 and unleashed, I love how she says this, unleashed a new lease on life. And then what I saw on her feed was that she has just launched a new television show called Finding Common Ground. And that is what really reached out to me, because I feel that's what we're missing so much of in divorce and so much in the world that we, not just the world of today, this past week, these past 8 days, it's been missing from our lives for a long time. So I'm thrilled to have you here, Dana.
And ironically, the name of the live stream, and this is why it just worked out in the universe is perfect, is Finding Common Ground. And here's a little promo before we finally get her on here for her upcoming show.
Shoulder to shoulder.
I'm Dana Davenport, and welcome to Finding Common Ground, a new show on Naperville Community Television
focused on important current events and how they impact our diverse population.
We hope to find our common ground.
And I'm Rebecca Malatke-Meslin. In this episode, we'll discuss the recent events that highlight the racial tension in Naperville and globally related to COVID-19.
First episode is very timely, and it discusses racism during this COVID pandemic era.
Specifically around our Asian American community, COVID-19, and some other recent issues that are local to Naperville as well as affecting our entire nation.
We've got some great experts, citizens of Naperville, and people who are just passionate about discussing some of the things that have happened and ways that we can be better allies.
Please join us as we try to find common ground.
Welcome, Dana.
Oh,
Finally.
Hi, Dana.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us. And sorry it took you me so long to get you on, but
it's my pleasure.
We are so glad to have you. And you obviously, this is a divorce live stream, and you.
We're talking about divorce.
What's that?
I said, are we talking about divorce?
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about divorce, but in a positive, solution-oriented way. And I, from our conversation when we first got, that it might not have been the best divorce for you, but it also had moved you into a new chapter.
Divorce. Just because a path is not easy doesn't mean it's not the best thing for you.
Right.
I think you learn so much from your experiences, and even if they are hard, that doesn't mean you should shy away from them. The conversations that we need to have now, the courageous conversations that we need to have now, are not easy. So it absolutely was the best divorce for me. because without my divorce and without my awakening and opening, I would not have the shows that I have or the opportunities that I've had. So everything happens for a reason.
No question. So how did you find, I mean, in the theme of common ground with your divorce, not going as smoothly as, some of the others we've heard or we talk about, move on from and get to that place of, nothing happens in life by mistake and using it to your advantage?
So I got started in podcasting. Like Susan said, I'm a full-time attorney. By trade, like that's what I've been trained to do. That's
we won't hold that against you, by the way.
Yeah.
Hey. Thank you very much.
It's a point in her favor.
Yeah. Thank you, Susan. Hello.
We like the nice.
As an attorney, I was a practicing attorney. I was married for 7 years. I have 2 children, 2 beautiful children, who are resultant of that marriage, and it was not the situation that sustained me. And it was after my divorce that I felt alive. I felt like I was living the life that I was supposed to live. So that marriage had served its purpose. And I was just living my life. And a friend of mine had a podcast that is no longer operational now. And she just wanted to talk to me about my divorce, because I felt like divorce can be a new chapter for you. A lot of people get caught up in, and part of grief when it comes to divorce is accepting, grief happens when what your plan was for your life turns out to not be the reality. So if someone dies, if you lose a job, if you have a miscarriage, if you have something that you did not plan, that is what grief is all about.
Growth opportunity.
Lost opportunity. So grieving divorce and being divorced. I had never planned on being a single mom. Let's just say my college days might have been different, but I felt like it was an opportunity for me to step into who I really am. My upbringing, my life, my career, my professionalism, all the things that have made me me. And I started writing. And so anyway, I was interviewed by a girlfriend of mine, and it was my family that encouraged me. They said, we're paying attention to you and your story. And we already know your story, but there's something there that we want you to tap into. And they pushed me basically to go into trying my show. And so my encouragement, if you get nothing else from me tonight, is be intentional about your life. That is my anniversary episode, which is on Naperville Community Television now for Dana Being Dana. Living intentionally. We are in a COVID pandemic. People are dying. Live intentionally. Don't be afraid to try something. Don't be afraid to do something, because what you said about something being hard, don't let something hard stop you. Challenges are what groom you, or what prune you for where you need to be in your life. Don't shy away from the hard stuff, because it's probably the best stuff that makes you the best person that you are. So I got a little website, took a couple pictures, and the first episode that I had in 2017 had 1,700 views on Facebook. Wow. And I was shocked, because I just planned on my mama and my best friend. So I thought I'd have 2 views. I could count on 2 views. But so much has come from that. Susan, thank you so much for mentioning the Homecoming Challenge, which is our Go Back, Give Back campaign, our alumni campaign that really took off. It was my 9th episode on radio. And it was in 2018. I was just looking for a mentor, because I really wanted to be intentional about this. I'm a single mom. I have 2 kids. I'm a lawyer. So I wanted to be intentional with my time. I didn't want to waste my time. So I want to do this if people are interested, if people feel what I'm doing, and it's something that's good. And so I wanted a mentor in this business and the stuff that I was doing. So again, another message is don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to speak up. I think we get so caught up in this age and era about rejection. People won't even call you because they're afraid you're not going to pick up the phone. Hello, we're from an era of voicemail and answering machines. Like, it's okay to leave a message. It's okay to call somebody and them not pick up, right? We get so caught up in the rejection associated with just reaching out and trying. They don't answer. No big deal, right? Being comfortable in so many of those things, and you all are entrepreneurs and all that you do, so you understand how rejection is a part of the business.
Mm-hmm.
How many times have y'all been told no? Right?
I was an actor for 30 years.
Okay. There's a ton of
I'm
rejection.
aware.
Exactly. There's a ton of rejection in doing anything that you're passionate about. So I want people, so if it's about your life and whether or not to stay or go, there's going to be rejection. There's going to be things, there's going to be roadblocks, but don't let those sway you from making those moves. So I looked to getting a mentor in the business and just growing my platform. And it ended up in trying a pilot of Dana Being Dana from radio or podcasting to television. And so we are now celebrating, we are now in our first year of television, and the topics range from divorce, which has always been my first episode, both radio and TV, because it was such a new opening, a new awakening, a new chapter for me that I'm very proud of, because I am now walking in my own light, in my own purpose. And just being passionate about all of that, I did a show about race. I've done shows about dating and relationships, divorce, narcissists, different topics that I'm passionate about that I think can help people. My show's about the human connection and things that connect people. And it was from there that Naperville Community Television came up with a news-based concept in terms of responding to current events. And we had no idea, obviously, what the future would hold. But our pilot was scheduled to air Wednesday, which is June 3rd. We taped on May 20th. That's 5 days before the New York City Central Park incident and the death of George Floyd. And we'll get into more of that. But finding common ground could not be at a more timely intersection with what's going on in our community, specifically Naperville and the Chicagoland area, which is where I live, and the world. I mean, it's just been incredible and overwhelming for me on some levels with everything that has happened and what we've done. I'm very proud of this first premiere episode, which aired June 3rd, because it's been very well received and so many tools there for how people can do better.
So if June 3rd has obviously passed, is there a way people can watch that episode online if they want to?
You can check me. I'm on social media. I'm on Facebook at Dana Being Dana. I've got a both personal and my business page. You can follow that and get all of my updates. You can scroll through there and find the original episode. It's timely. It's right there on my timeline. I'm also on Instagram, but the video itself is on Facebook. You can also go, and because of the timing, meaning that we taped before so much has happened in our country with respect to Black Lives Matter, if you go to NCTV, it's also there, nctv17.com, not to be confused with NC-17, nctv17.com. You can find Finding Common Ground, you can find Dana Being Dana, and it's all there. But we taped on Facebook. The Facebook version basically has a live segment that we did right before the show aired, which addresses what's been happening since we aired May 20th. So since we filmed May 20th. So you've got just some commentary from myself, and shout out to my co-host, Rebecca Malaki-Meslin, who is fabulous and an ally. When I talk about ally, she's a white woman, non-Jewish. She looks Jewish, and her name's Rebecca, so she gets that a lot. So I just want to put that out there. But just an ally in doing good in our community and doing good in our country. So I'm very excited that she and I have embarked on this project together, because I think there's so much that we can do to be a positive force.
So when we talk about what's going on in the world today, I just want to sort of get, if everybody could sort of put on a one-word reaction to the current events and what you see when you turn on TV. Kate, I'll start with you.
Oh, great. One word?
One word.
And you can use your colorful vocabulary if you want.
For me, I think if it was one word, I would say hope.
Okay. Susan?
Mine's been sadness.
Mm-hmm. Dana?
Finally.
Yeah.
Mm.
That was mine, man.
Yeah.
I grew up in a predominantly white environment. I went to a historically Black college, went to one of the top 10 law schools in the country. And so for me, I have experienced racism, prejudice, bias in all different aspects. And I talk about privilege, and I loved the video that you didn't tell me about in advance with respect to privilege. I love it though.
I like to throw little curveballs and not let everybody know what I'm doing.
Throw your balls, Ben.
Right.
Do your thing. I think talking about privilege is so good because people don't understand that. And sometimes those are trigger words, right? Privilege, like I've experienced hardship. Privilege doesn't mean a lack of hardship. Privilege doesn't mean a lack of challenges and experiences. We all enjoy various levels of privilege. If you are heterosexual, you enjoy that privilege. If you are a man, you enjoy that privilege. If you are middle class or upper middle class, you enjoy that privilege. So there's varied levels. Everybody enjoys certain privileges on certain levels. And for me, I'm glad, what I've spent my time since this premiere and since I posted some things that I think have gotten some attention of people, which is kind of where I'm at about a week later. I've had most discussions about privilege. It's been a crazy week for me. Not in addition to what's been happening nationally, but just lots of discussions about privilege and what that means. And people are finally understanding what their privilege means. And this is not about, white guilt or making people feel bad or anything. It's about just understanding your privilege and then what to do about that. Nobody's wanting people to feel guilty necessarily. I don't feel guilty. Take action, right? Be more involved, be more engaged, like speak up, step up.
Well, let me it's the same thing, I think, as we talked about. It's acknowledgement of reality, right?
Yeah.
It is just like, let's talk about common ground, right? It's acknowledgement of reality that I, as a white man, Kate, I heard it on your podcast, that we have blind spots, that we, no matter how, in tune, no matter how allied we are, and conversely, there's blind spots everywhere towards different people, different races. So we have to acknowledge that. We have to acknowledge that I have privilege. And I also have to acknowledge that I don't know what it's like to be a black woman in the United States of America. I don't know what it's like to be a black man in the United States of America. Yeah. But I have to trust in you that you're not just talking about all this racism you've experienced in your life as crying victim, but yet try to understand it.
Very much so. It's about acknowledging experiences that are outside of your own.
Yeah.
And not trying to qualify or read things through your own lens of, well, this is not what I've experienced. Right. Well, it's not about you. The post that I made that went, I would call it local viral, because it's not like, I think Linda is like a viral post. But I posted because I am, in addition to being a mother, I'm a mother of a black son. And I'm a mother of a special needs black son. And what I posted about was that I am fearful for his life because one of my son's diagnoses is anxiety. Mm-hmm. And his current anxieties are surrounding coronavirus, obviously, and bees. And while I remind him every day that since this pandemic, that he is healthy, I have kept him healthy, he is okay. Anxiety doesn't always trust. He is 11 years old now, but when he was in first grade, he ran from school one day because he saw a bee. And the school had to call me like, we're so sorry, Dana, but your son ran off of the campus in the school grounds. He saw a bee, and so it's just about reassuring him and trying to manage that anxiety. And the first thing I thought about years ago was, what if he ran from the cops, right? What if he got pulled over? What if he was speeding or whatever? But what if he got pulled over because what happens with Black Lives Matter and all these moments, there's no precursor, there's no preview, there's no heads up like, hey, we're going to rough y'all up in about 30 minutes. Right. So you got time to kind of think of your plan and your strategy and charge your battery on your phone so you can record it all. No, these things happen in a split second. Late at night, sometimes, many times, not always. But just, what if my son, and what I thought of is like, what if he encountered a bee at 16 years old and just started running? Right. Would the police see a threat off of a speeding ticket because people have died for less? Or would they say, well, maybe this, maybe there's something's going on with him. Maybe he has special needs. Maybe he presented in a way that shows what his special needs are. And I was just speaking from the heart. I just couldn't sleep after some of the days that had gone by the previous week. And I was just shocked that I was, how well it was received. Or that, because what I said was see him, see me, see us, meaning like all mothers, Black mothers, mothers of Black children, biracial children, I mean, you name it. And we just need to do better, America. Yeah. And so I was just floored overwhelmed in a great way, but overwhelmed nonetheless by how received that was. I was asked to speak at a rally in Naperville, which is where I live, and the Chicago Tribune, big newspaper in the Chicagoland area, picked that up. And so it kind of snowballed from there. And there've been speaking engagements and other things, just including, joining this podcast and just talking about that. And so I just think it's very important to address what it is bias and how we all have biases. And it's about kind of checking, some of those biases, the blind spots, like you said. Special needs, I think, is a blind spot in this whole discussion of Black Lives Matter.
And I think it's important to distinguish, at least I might be stepping in it here, but there's a difference.
Come on in.
There's a difference between biased or prejudice and racism, right?
Of course.
They can be completely, different from each other. And I want to bring, I don't want to discount what Kate and Susan said. I want to give them an opportunity to talk about, Kate, with your hope. Why hope?
Well, I think it's in line with what Dana said, finally, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that word might even be better. But what I see is when I see tens of thousands of people marching in the streets, when I see tens of thousands of people marching in the streets of Copenhagen in solidarity, this is now the single largest civil rights movement in history.
Yes.
With over 80 countries participating. Like, holy shit. Right? So what I see is, my hope is for all the sadness and all the grief and all the destruction and all of the burning and all of that, that fucking finally.
You're so right. It took a pandemic to bring
it did, because
focus.
Yes, someone said there's a great post that also said there's something to be said for the fact that we were not working, that we were all home, and that we won't work, because if we were all wrapped up in our 40-hour work weeks, we would not have been able to protest this much, and maybe that's the design.
Well, and frustration, I think, might play something into that too, right? Yeah, I mean, it's a perfect storm. It's a perfect storm.
We had time and we had the energy.
Right. Susan, you had brought up sadness, I think. I think that's an important, thing to see, because it's hard to see, right? It's hard to see what's going on too.
Yeah, it's been, and it's not like it's the first time we've seen it. I mean, as much as I want to be hopeful and say, finally, I struggle to have faith that people are going to make an effect change. I want them to. I want to be a part of it. But we've seen this so many times. it happens over and over again. And the sadness is just that perpetual, I'm one of those people, I have a tough career. I deal with people who are very unhappy day in and day out. And so I've, in my life, sort of turned to this. If it's not a happy thing, I don't want to know about it in my real life. And that was my first instinct here, which I think many people, right? This is sad. This is hard. And I've, actually Kate kicked my privileged white ass and told me, didn't tell me, posted something that spoke to me and told me that my privileged little white ass had to start paying attention and all. And I'm watching, and as an empath, the level of anger and sadness and hurt that is coming through TV screens and my phone and I'm sucking it in, and it's incredibly sad.
Right.
It's as an empath with you, Susan, it is so exhausting. I mean, I have been flattened all week, and I'm not even out like marching, and I'm white, like holy shit, right? And I'm tired.
Right.
So I can't imagine, right?
And a level of trauma and exhaustion that Black people live with on a daily basis.
Right. So I guess
it just makes me sadder because
Exactly.
I start to, even at a tiny little edge, maybe understand that tiny little edge, and I'm like, fuck.
Yeah,
This sucks.
And it does, and you bring up a good point, which is where I think we got to move into the solution part of finding this common ground. Is you brought up something so right on, Susan, and I have the same thing that we've seen this movie before, right? And it almost seems like, way back in '92 and Rodney King, and the first time we saw it on video, like, okay, this is going to be it. And then, each one from Ferguson and it goes on, and it's like, this one's going to be different. This one looks and feels different. But then the spotlight gets taken off of it. The media goes away, and it dies until another unarmed Black man or, Black woman dies. So what can we do to keep the conversation going or find the common ground? Because it's not the marching. It's not yes, it brings attention to it, but how do we keep it to get to that common ground, to go way up to at least acknowledging where I saw a poll, and I won't say what party, but it was 81% of people polled. There's a Pew Research, and you can look it up. It went way in depth, but the number one thing that really stuck out to me was 81% of the people polled, white, said that the nation has done enough or too much for African Americans in this country. So to me, I mean, now this was done before.
We know what party that was.
This was in 2019, so it was done before, the incident. So, Dana, what can you give as an advice and everybody to keep this thing going so it doesn't become until next time?
Ooh.
Kate, I think you should go first.
Yeah, go ahead, Kate.
Oh no, I mean to step. Was that?
And I'll tell you why afterwards. Go ahead.
Kate.
Because I raised my hand when he asked you.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Because you were so excited.
I was excited.
Yeah,
but no, I want. No. The question was asked of Dana, so I want to give that.
But it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Well, okay, good.
There you go.
That's
Check my
why
ass.
I was. That's okay. Good. Exactly.
That's
It
one
should
thing.
be. So what we can do, here's what I think we need to do. We need to, first of all, not stop the conversation. Not fucking stop the conversation. I had a conversation with my marketing team this week where I said, listen, we're shifting everything. My entire Instagram, I did the thing where it's like June 1st through 7th, I'm only going to be posting and amplifying the voices of Black businesses and, all of that, right? And then I said to them, but we don't fall off a cliff on June 7th. This is now woven into my business model. This is now part of my business model. We don't just fall off a cliff and go back to everything, as it was. So the first thing we do is not fucking stop talking about it. Don't go back to business as usual. These are things that need to be discussed all the time. The other thing that we need to do is invest our money in Black businesses in black, and it's something that I'm looking at for myself, right? Because I invest on the macro level where I donate every month to the Legal Defense Fund. Cheryl and I can have all my money all the time. And I donate, every month to the ACLU. And I'm very active in those areas. But what about the micro? Like right on the micro level, divesting from, businesses that sort of support white supremacy, such as Amazon. Like, ouch, right? So divesting and investing, our money has to go into communities of color. If we are not putting our resources into communities of color and building them up. I don't know if you saw that video. Oh God, what's her name? Kimberly, talking about like when she was talking about the Monopoly game. Did you guys? Yeah. Right, like putting our money and our resources into supporting communities of color and businesses and women and whatever we need to do, right? So the conversation can't stop, and it has to be like my friend Toy Smith, who is an amazing, amazing woman, and she is a single mom raising 4 kids, and she's a Black woman, 4 kids, three baby daddies. She talks about this openly. And she is, everyone needs to be following her on Instagram because she's like the smartest person I know. This is a former client of mine who became one of my closest friends. And she's taught me so much. And, one of the things that she has been talking about this, divesting from and investing in communities of color. There's something else that she said today that I was about to say and I totally forgot, and it'll come back to me and I'll come back to it. But those are the things that I think we need to be doing. This is not just a one and done. Oh, this is what she said. She said, build it into your budget, like your Netflix, like your electric bill, like your rent bill. You build your investment in communities of color into your monthly budget, into your bottom line. That's what we need to be doing.
Okay. Dana?
Thank you, Kate, for everything. Drop the mic, girl. Drop the mic.
That's the least we can do, right?
And the reason why I wanted you to go first is because what I've heard in the past week, Monday, a couple of messages went out because I went to an HBCU, and so I'm in a bunch of HBCU groups where it's people of color talking, and they're like, "Have your white friends checked on you today?" Because that was kind of what everybody felt like the need was. And oftentimes when this happens, right? Who leads the diversity committee? Who leads the women's group, right? It's all of the people. You put the burden of the knowledge and the sharing on the people who are oppressed or that group. And that's not where the onus lies. You're preaching to the choir, right? I don't need to talk about diversity because I've lived it my entire life. Google Highland Park and see who used to live there in the Chicagoland area. People people that you recognize, Bulls players, and so NFL players. So it's like, I know this stuff. I think it starts with a couple of things, and I can succinctly say these, and I can expand on them if you want. But it's checking your own bias, being accountable for your own actions. The Harvard has an implicit association test. There are others out there, but really coming to grips with where your own biases lie. Ever thinking that racism has died down even when Obama came around, saying all lives matter, not responding to racist jokes, being complicit in the systematic structures of racism by your silence, right? You have levels of bias that need to be acknowledged and perhaps checked. And that's not a bad thing. Again, we all have biases. So it's not something to be upset about or sad about, right? That's your own victimization of like, oh my God, like, I'm not a racist or some of those biases, but just being real. We all have biases and it's okay. Understanding your blind spots, again, it takes less than a second to make judgments or pass judgments that are often rooted in fear or media or other propaganda that's not really rooted in fact or truth. And paying attention to those. And what we do is we seek confirmation bias, right? So it's like, I think all Black men are scary. So you look at the news and you're like, see, the media plays into your confirmation bias because they give you things that reaffirm things that you already have in your head. So paying attention to those and understanding that. But the allyship, right? How do you operate? Do you only talk to people who look like you? When you're walking around on the street, do you only acknowledge the people who look like you? In the grocery store, in the movies, you know, who rips your tickets, who you talk to, who you engage with. So it's, what example are you setting for those around you and your own children? When you're walking down the street, do you only make eye contact with people who look like you? So checking some of that. Part of that is being intentional about who you are and who you connect with. Because you can't say you're all about anti-racism and diversity when your own life doesn't reflect that. Now, I've been asked this week, like, well, how do I make Black friends? And what I've said is that you have to be, it's not about shopping, right?
Is that a question?
Oh, honey, I can tell you about the week that I've had. You don't get it. Like, yes, that's been a question that I've received. And part of that is, you know, and my life looks like a Benetton commercial. I'm sorry to date myself, but like, if you remember Benetton, United Colors.
I think
United Colors of Benetton, right? That was my life. So my friends are white, Black, Puerto Rican, Asian, Peruvian, from Argentina. I have friends from everywhere. And so my kids grow up really understanding and not seeing color as much. So I've had some really tough conversations about that because it's just something they weren't used to. Because my environment, my lifestyle, my friendship is very diverse. And so make that a part of your fabric. You know, because it's hard to be a racist when your friend is of a different color.
And it's also a good excuse.
Totally.
Right? I mean, I have a Black friend or, you know, right. or whatever it is.
It can't be racist. I have a Black friend.
Right.
It's tokenism, because what I get a lot is, well, you're different, Dana. Like, you're a lawyer, you know, you do this. No. And that's why I posted what I did, because you need to see me. At the end of the day, the best accomplishment I've ever had is being a mother. Yeah. And I am a Black mother of a Black son and an equally precocious Black daughter. And so if you don't see me as a Black woman, despite my accolades and she's doing this and she's doing that, then you're missing the point. And so it's about speaking up and standing up. And once, you know, I got a message like, I'm just crying. I have all these tears. Dry your tears, sister. Don't cry for me. Stand next to me. Do you speak up when racist jokes are being made? Do you think it's okay to dress up in a Halloween costume in blackface? You know, do you think Eurocentric education is okay? I mean, there's so many different things. I mean, we all condemn, for the most part, covert racism, but it's overt racism.
Overt, yeah.
But it's the covert racism. What do you do about that?
Dana, again, this before I go, I just want to mention a very wise comment by my wife. People need to sit in their own discomfort regarding their bias. All of us do, and she's a very wise woman. Not for the fact that she can't be judged for marrying me. That's not the level of her wiseness. But do you ever find that sometimes you are used? You know, you hear this. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. We had a Black president. You know, here you are, you know, a Black woman who's a lawyer and all your accolades, like as almost an excuse why there's not racism or why racism doesn't exist. I'll tell you, because today on my radio show, people called in and that was what it was. You know, that they use these examples of people, yes, who pulled themselves out, but don't realize that what you had to go through. And what a peer who was a white peer who was in poverty, who pulled herself out, had to go through, what the struggle and how much harder it was for you.
Yeah, as a Black woman, and as a Black woman attorney, I'm often underestimated in the things that I do in the professional workplace. I've been asked to get coffee. I've been asked, when is the lawyer getting here? And I'm like, I don't know. Dana must be running late. You should call her. You know, but I also know my stuff. Right. And so I don't get into a room or a negotiation table not knowing what I need to know. So when I sit down to negotiate a deal, I know things backwards and forwards. And I remember working on a deal in London, and we were negotiating the escrow clause. And I talked about the inconsistencies with the escrow. And I said, why would we be doing more than what the escrow agreement calls for? And they were like, oh, that's not true, blah, blah, blah. And they looked it up, and of course I was right. And they were like, we should break for the day, like, because they wanted to go back and read what they needed to read. The next day they came back, and keep in mind, everybody in this room besides myself, was a white man, well over 50, and opposing counsel on the other side. He had a hearing aid. Like, I can't make this up. I was in a basement in London negotiating this deal, and I was like, can you hear me now? Do you hear what I'm saying? Because he came back the next day, like, I had rocked him because he had made all of these assumptions based on his bias, right? She's young. She doesn't know what she's talking about. They flew her out here, blah, blah, blah. But I also knew my stuff. And so the next day they were like, where'd you go to law school? Like, you're so smart. You're so well-spoken. You know, that's implicit racism, to be well-spoken. Yeah. And so, you know, for me, it happens. It's not over. It happens all the time. My racism that I encounter or experience is just different than someone who may not be the same gender, who may not be at the same socioeconomic level, who may not be in the same place, but we all experience it. Ask any woman, is sexism over, right? We got somebody over here grabbing them by the peas, right? Yeah. Like, sexism is alive and well. When there's no pay equality still.
There's no Equal Rights Amendment. Yeah. It's not been fucking ratified. Oh,
absolutely. My God. So people who say that want to placate and say it hasn't come up lately or it hasn't come up yet. Racism isn't dead. We're just recording it more. There's no more racism than there was before. We just have cameras. Mm-hmm. We just didn't have cameras in 1968, 1984. Yeah. Right?
Right.
It's just more visible to you. It's more in your face.
And this presidency has lifted it to the level of, well, it's okay. We can come out of the closet now.
Correct.
They've been there. They've just been hiding too. They've been, they just have a voice now.
Yeah, very much so.
Well, the words, right? And again, I want to be clear because I think that it's important, not because somebody says something, right? Or somebody says they're biased, that means that they're racist.
Of course not. Listen, I have biases. I'm biased against tall people.
Right.
I'll just come out there and say that if it makes you feel more comfortable, all tall people can just.
Right. Or a bias would be if you see, an overweight person shopping and they're pulling, and you think to yourself, so it's just when you can give a name to it and you can acknowledge it. Right. And you can at least be aware, like all the, and I hate to be the pessimist, but all these videos and all these, men dying and everything we're seeing isn't going to change unless people can start at least acknowledging their biases. Right. And it does not mean you're racist. It does.
Like I said, I've come out, I have bias.
Right.
We all have bias. And you make those judgments based on your implicit bias, your unconscious bias. It's unconscious because you're not even really thinking about it.
Right.
It's about what people, you decide whether they're in or out. And that's what we talk about in the Finding Common Ground episode. Your bias, in less than a second, you pay attention to those biases and determine whether this is somebody you're going to embrace or reject. Right. And that's okay on some levels, but when you make action, when you discriminate,
right,
and there's results based off of that bias, that's when it becomes racism, right. Sexism.
Right. And like your example of the old men in London, like they didn't probably even know that they weren't intentionally offending you, right? They weren't gonna, right? So the other one, the other one is that I hear that I learned, in college is I don't see color. Oh. Right? Mm-hmm. That is bullshit. Right? We all see color, but we all see it. But I think what you're saying when you say that is that you don't see them for who they are or acknowledge what they've been through.
Right.
Correct.
And what burden they carry with that color.
One of my tenets is about celebrating diversity, celebrating the things that bring us together. And to bring it all full circle, get ready for it.
Yeah.
I connected with many people who did not look like me through my divorce. Just the sheer situation, the pain, the agony of transitioning from a life that you thought would be yours to understanding that this is not the relationship that suits you or feeds you, separating from that life and stepping into where you're really supposed to be, being in the life that you're supposed to have, pursuing your dreams. And that's what I always, when I talk about divorce and encourage people to live their life. Kate, you deal with people who make a decision whether to stay or go, right? Just I don't care what you decide, just make sure you're in a situation that feeds you.
Yes.
Because I feel like I am being the person that I was meant to be. And I couldn't have done that in my marriage. And so that's, what this is really all about. And that's really what I'm grateful for.
And I think it's also the important thing is, and you touched on it earlier when you were talking about your divorce, is through these hardships in life. Like, life isn't easy, right? Let's just face it.
Sure.
So, it's easier for me just because of the color of my skin, but it doesn't mean it. I haven't had my
man.
And I have a penis. Yes.
Yeah.
And that puts me at unfortunately at the top of the the chart, right? But through pain and through hardships, if we're willing to take a look at it, and we're willing to, like Nikki and I, we were willing to take a look at our stuff, right? We didn't go around it, we didn't ignore it, we went straight through it, and and we came out the other side better. So maybe this is the opportunity that this nation's been presented, that this is our challenge and this is our hardship and this is the one, and I hope it is. And it's making people who, might take a look at themselves where they've seen other videos, of unarmed black men getting killed. This one, I think at least I've heard from people who aren't, racist, but I've heard different things from them in the past where. What's that? I'm sorry.
I said for people who have just been silent. I mean, look at the NFL, right?
Right.
They've done a whole 180.
Right.
About Black Lives Matter.
Mm-hmm. We were wrong. Really?
Right. I would say a 179. I think.
Yeah.
Deserves some direct words, but that's
right. They said, they came out and they were like, "Oh, we were wrong." It was like, "Oh, did you give Colin Kaepernick back his job? Did you
call him? Did he get a call?
The point, I guess, to that is that they got to where they got, and it took them what they took them, but they're there.
Yeah.
Right.
But they're there.
And during the whole Colin Kaepernick thing, it was clear to those who knew he was going to be on the right side of history. It wasn't a question of if, it was a question of when. And just like Muhammad Ali, and just like other people who have stood up and put their stuff on the line, they're on the right side of history. And right now, people have the opportunity to be on the right side of history.
Correct. And what I've said, and I posted about this, I said, there was a post that I found that said racism is so American that people think when you are protesting it, you are protesting America. Read it again, say it again. Racism is so American that people think when you're protesting racism, you're protesting America. And I'm just hoping I'm hopeful, that we can bring about change. I was fortunate enough to be asked to interview a police officer. She was the sheriff of Kane County, which is a local county to Chicago, yesterday. And it was a great opportunity to give him the platform to speak about, from a police perspective, about racism and, denouncing some of that and just what's important to hold police accountable. Because I think the standard should be similar to pilots, right? Pilots can't afford to have a bad day, right? Well, he was just having a tough day. That's why he crashed that plane into the mountain, right? Pilots have to have every day a good day. And I feel like police should be held to the same type of standard because similarly, they're dealing with lives. But I'm thankful that we have opened the door for conversation. Yeah. When I say finally, dot, dot, dot. I'm hopeful that we can continue these conversations, keep them alive and well, and make changes that our children can enjoy, generations to come can enjoy, so that diversity isn't so much a thing, but just a way of life and how we are. Our country is changing. Our world is changing. We are more multicultural than we've ever been before. I don't know too many people who don't have multiculturalism in their families.
Mm-hmm.
So it begs the question is, why is there so much hate and fear, right? Because you love cousin so-and-so. Don't make them the token, make them the reason why you are insistent about being an ally. It's not just cousin blah, blah, blah. It's about everybody. And that's a way of life.
Well, on that note, mic drop. That is a wrap. I want to thank you, Dana, for coming on. Again, it is DanaBeanDana.com.
DanaBeanDana.com. I'm on Facebook and Instagram.
Everything Dana Bean Dana?
Yes.
Because why else would it be anything else? And my part. This was too important. This was too important to either to ignore or to not talk about, right? But to bring it back to the divorce thing, and I did a little bit ago, is it was about common ground, and we turned a very, very bad, ugly situation that could have affected our son. And the way he looks at relationships and his happiness, and instead, we turned it into something good. So we got to get a place to find a common ground, and the human condition, but it takes acknowledgement, right? It takes acknowledgement of who we are and honesty of who we are. And I thank you, Dana, Kate, and Susan, as always. Love you, and we'll do it again next week on something. Hopefully it'll be a little bit brighter and shinier. But thank you so much.
Thank you, Dana.
Yeah.
Dana, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Seriously.